The smell hit first, copper and cordite, hot metal and cold air. Evelyn's hands moved without thought. Left hand pressing, right hand wrapping. The tourniquet went high and tight above the wound exactly where it needed to be, exactly as fast as it needed to happen. 30 seconds. That was all the time between living and dying when the femoral artery opened up. Reaper 1, we have 3 down. The radio crackled against her hip, but her focus never wavered. The young man beneath her hands was 22 years old. She knew because he'd told her 3 hours ago, nervous energy making him chatty before the insertion. 22 years old and bleeding out in the dirt of a country whose name would never appear in any official record. Femoral artery compromised, she said into her shoulder mic voice, steady despite the chaos erupting around them. 30 seconds of shock. I need cover fire northwest position. The answer came in bullets. Not from her team. Reaper 2 went down hard. Nathaniel, 6'3" of muscle and confidence, dropped like someone had cut his strings. The Barrett rifle clattered beside him, that massive 50 caliber beast of a weapon sliding across the rocky ground. Evelyn's hands didn't stop moving. Couldn't stop. The tourniquet was almost secured. Almost. The young soldier's eyes found hers, on and desperate, and asking a question she couldn't answer yet. Stay with me, she told him. Breathe. Count backwards from 100. 100, he whispered. 99, 90, another burst of gunfire, closer now. The enemy sniper had them pinned, and with Reaper 2 down, no one could touch that Barrett. No one except Evelyn pulled the tourniquet tight, checked the placement, locked it down. The bleeding slowed to a seep, then stopped. Not dead yet, not on her watch. She moved. The Barrett weighed 30 pounds unloaded, 35 with a full magazine. Recoil could break an unprepared collarbone, knock the wind from untrained lungs, leave bruises that lasted weeks. She'd qualified on it at Quantico back when the instructors thought she was crazy for even trying. Her hands found the grip, found the stock, found the scope. Reaper 1, the team leader's voice cracked through the radio. You can't handle that weapon. She was already sighting, already breathing, already squeezing. The rifle roared. The world compressed into that single moment of fire and force and perfect, terrible focus. 900 meters away, the enemy sniper's position went silent. Evelyn's hands moved back to the wounded, back to saving instead of taking, back to the work that defined her more than any shot ever could. You never said you could shoot, Nathaniel gasped from where he lay, his own blood soaking into the ground. She pressed her hands against his wound, feeling the hot pulse of life trying to escape. You never asked, she said. The memory lasted less than a heartbeat. But 47 years later, it still had the power to pull her under. 47 years later, the Wednesday evening crowd at Addie's bar was thin. It always was. The regulars knew each other by sight, if not by name, knew when to nod and when to mind their own business. The television in this corner played highlights from a football game no one was really watching. The air smelled of beer and old wood and decades of quiet conversations. Evelyn Blackwood sat in her usual spot at the far end of the bar, her back to the wall, her eyes on the amber liquid in her glass of iced tea. Not whiskey. She'd stopped drinking 40 years ago when steady hands became more important than steady nerves. But she still came here, still ordered a drink, still went through the motions of a ritual that had defined Wednesday evenings for the past 15 years. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the glass. Age, the doctor said. Essential tremor, nothing to worry about, perfectly normal for 81. She knew better. Her hands shook because they remembered. Because every Wednesday at 7 p.m. they remembered what they'd held and what they'd lost and what they'd done with the time in between. The jacket draped over the back of her stool was olive drab field surplus, faded to almost gray in places. 2 patches decorated the right sleeve. The first was clear enough if you knew what to look for, the caduceus and anchor of a Navy corpsman, worn, but still recognizable. The second patch sat above it, so faded and frayed that its design had become more memory than reality. A circular shape, maybe a skull, maybe wings. The threads barely held together anymore. Evelyn was small. 5'2" in shoes she no longer wore, 98 pounds on a good day when she remembered to eat properly. Her silver hair was pulled back in a simple bun. Her face showed every one of her 81 years, lined and weathered like old paper. A hearing aid nested in her right ear, nearly invisible. When she walked, she limped, favoring her left hip, where shrapnel had found her in 1978 and never quite left. To anyone glancing her way, she was exactly what she appeared to be, an old woman alone nursing a drink and her memories in quiet solitude. The door opened. Evelyn didn't look up. The door opened 100 times a night in a place like this. But something in the sudden shift of energy made her aware. The way the air seemed to change. The way conversations paused for half a beat before resuming. 5 men entered, young, late 20s, early 30s. They moved with a particular kind of controlled energy that Evelyn recognized immediately the way a sailor recognizes the ocean. They were operators, special forces, the close-cropped hair and trimmed beards, the watchful eyes that scanned the room once cataloging exits and threats with professional efficiency. The way they took over a booth near the center of the bar, their casual clothes doing nothing to hide what they were. Delta, probably. Fort Liberty was crawling with them. One of them was limping slightly. Another had his left arm wrapped tight against his ribs beneath his jacket. Fresh injuries not quite healed. Recently deployed, recently returned, recently failed. Evelyn could read it all in the way they carried themselves. The frustration, the anger looking for a target, the desperate need to prove something to someone, to themselves. She'd seen it before, had felt it herself once upon a time. She turned her attention back to her tea. "What's that old lady doing here?" The voice carried across the bar, not quite loud enough to be aggressive, but not quiet enough to be private. Young, male, edged with the kind of casual arrogance that came from being very good at something very dangerous. Evelyn's fingers tightened on her glass. She didn't look up. "VFW halls across town," another voice added. This one darker, older, more controlled, but no less dismissive. "This isn't exactly the bingo crowd." The bartender, Adelaide Bishop, shot a warning look from down the bar. Addie had owned this place for 23 years, and she knew her regulars. Knew that Evelyn Blackwood came in 3 nights a week, ordered the same tea set in the same spot, and never bothered a soul. Knew there was a story there buried deep that maybe didn't need digging up. But the young operators weren't regulars, weren't locals, and weren't interested in wisdom. The one who'd spoken first stood up from the booth. Tall, lean, coiled muscle under a gray t-shirt that had Army printed so small you'd miss it if you weren't looking. His name was Kai Thornton, though Evelyn didn't know that yet. 29 years old, 3 combat deployments, 12 confirmed kills, and 2 teammates lost just last week in Syria because someone made the wrong call at the wrong time. He walked over to the bar, his gait smooth and predatory. Slid onto the stool next to Evelyn without asking permission. "Ma'am," he said, and to his credit there was a thread of genuine curiosity beneath the mockery. "No disrespect, but this isn't exactly the VFW hall. You sure you're in the right place?" Evelyn turned her head slowly, looked at him with pale blue eyes that had seen too much sun and too much darkness, and held a weariness that went deeper than bone. "Just having tea," she said quietly. Her voice was soft, measured. The kind of voice that didn't waste words because it had learned long ago that words rarely changed anything. Kai's eyes drifted down to the jacket draped over her stool, lingered on the patches. "Navy Corpsman," he said, reading the first patch. His tone shifted slightly, gained a note of professional respect. "When did you serve?" "Long time ago." "Where?" "Different places." The answer clearly frustrated him. Evelyn could see it in the tightening of his jaw, the narrowing of his eyes. From the booth his teammates were watching, now interest peaked. One of them, broad-shouldered, graying at the temples, clearly the team leader, leaned forward slightly. "What about that other patch?" Kai pointed at the faded insignia above the corpsman's symbol. "What unit is that?" Evelyn's gaze dropped to it. The worn threads, the barely visible design that had once meant everything and now meant mostly pain. "Just an old patch," she said. Wrong answer. She knew it the moment the words left her mouth. Knew it in the way Kai's expression hardened, in the way his teammates tensed in their booth. These were men who bled for their insignia, official or otherwise. Men who'd lost brothers wearing patches just like them. The idea of someone faking it, even accidentally, was gasoline on a smoldering fire. "Just an old patch," Kai repeated, voice losing its measured courtesy. "Ma'am, I mean no disrespect, but people have died for the patches they wore. So when I see something I don't recognize on someone who won't identify it, that raises questions." From the booth, the team leader stood. Griffin Hayes, 41 years old, 2 failed marriages, and 17 years in special operations. He moved to flank Kai's other side, creating a loose semicircle around Evelyn's stool. "What unit?" Griffin asked. His voice was harder than Kai's, more direct. The voice of someone who'd asked that question 100 times before and knew all the ways people lied. Evelyn set down her tea, carefully, precisely. Her hands didn't shake now. Muscle memory took over, the kind that lasted longer than age. "It was a long time ago," she said again. "It doesn't matter anymore." "It matters to us," Kai said. The third operator joined them, then the fourth, then the fifth. 5 men, all combat trained, all carrying the weight of recent loss, all focused on one small elderly woman who just wanted to drink her tea in peace. Addie moved down the bar, alarm clear in her eyes. "Gentlemen," she said firmly, "Mrs. Blackwood is a regular. She doesn't cause trouble. How about you let her be Mrs. Blackwood?" Kai said, testing the name. "Related to Master Chief Robert Blackwood." Something flickered across Evelyn's face. Brief, painful, immediately suppressed. "He was my husband," she said quietly. "Was it died 15 years ago." The operators exchanged glances. Master Chief Robert Blackwood had been a legend at Fort Libbert. SEAL Team 6 died in a training accident that wasn't quite an accident in a country that wasn't quite at peace. His widow drinking alone in a bar made a certain kind of sense. But it didn't explain the patch. The youngest operator, a kid barely 26 with nervous energy and sharp eyes, pulled out his phone. Started typing. Sloan Whitmore, fresh from his second deployment, still young enough to think database searches solve mysteries. "That patch design," Sloan said after a moment, frowning at his screen. "I can't find any record of it. Not in any official database." "Could be custom," another operator suggested. "Jake Morrison, the team medic. Unit made." "Or fake," Kai said bluntly. Evelyn's jaw tightened. "Just slightly. Just enough." "I've been coming here for 15 years, she said, voice still quiet but gaining an edge like tempered steel. 3 nights a week, same seat, same time. Never bothered anyone. I'd like to keep it that way." "Then tell us what unit," Griffin said. "Clear this up. We're not trying to give you a hard time, ma'am. We're just trying to protect the honor of the men we've served with." The irony of that statement hung in the air like smoke. These young operators, barely 30, lecturing an 81-year-old woman about honor, about service, about protecting legacies they couldn't begin to understand. Evelyn looked at each of them in turn, saw their certainty, their judgment, their youth. "It doesn't matter anymore," she said for the third time. Kai's patience snapped. He reached out, finger pointing at the faded patch on her jacket. "This matters," he said, "whether you like it or not. Because if you're wearing something you didn't earn." The moment his finger touched the frayed fabric, the world shifted for Evelyn. The smell of the bar vanished, replaced by hot metal and blood. The hum of the beer cooler became the thump of helicopter blades beating against a dark sky. She wasn't 81 anymore. She was 34, crammed in the back of a transport, the floor slick with something warm. Nathaniel was there, face covered in grime and sweat, grinning despite the chaos. He reached over and slapped the brand new patch on her shoulder. The skull and wings crisp and clear, an hour under the dim red light of the cabin. "Reaper 1, he shouted over the rotor noise. "Wear it proud." The memory lasted less than a second. A single frame of film seared into her consciousness. She blinked. The bar came back into focus. Kai was still there, his hand near her jacket, his face a mask of smug certainty. Addie had seen enough. The bartender turned and walked quickly to the small office behind the bar, closing the door behind her. The regulars assumed she was calling the police. A few of them looked relieved. But Addie wasn't dialing 911. She opened a worn wooden drawer in her desk and pulled out a laminated card. On it was a single phone number written in permanent marker. The ink slightly faded but still legible. A retired 2-star general, a man who used to drink at this very bar, had given it to her 8 years ago. "If Evelyn ever has trouble," he'd said, his voice grave, "the kind of trouble a uniform understands. You call this number. Don't ask questions, just call." Addie's fingers trembled as she dialed. It rang twice. "JSOC Operations Center." The voice was clipped, professional, bored. "Hello," Addie said, trying to keep her voice steady. "My name is Adelaide Bishop. I'm calling about Evelyn Blackwood." She explained quickly. The aggressive young men, the cornering, the patch, the accusations of stolen valor, the growing tension that felt like a match held too close to gasoline. "I don't want trouble," she finished, "but they won't leave her alone. They think she's faking." "Evelyn Blackwood," the duty officer repeated. The boredom in his voice suggested he'd heard this kind of thing before. Another crank call, another misunderstanding. "Ma'am, can you confirm the location?" Addie gave him the bar's address. There was a pause, the soft clicking of a keyboard, the duty officer humming slightly under his breath. Then silence. 10 seconds of absolute silence that stretched like pulled wire. When the voice came back, all the boredom was gone, replaced by something electric, urgent, almost shocked. "Ma'am," he said, his voice dropping to an intense whisper, "keep them there. Do not let them leave. Do not let anyone touch her. Help is on the way right now." The line went dead. Addie stared at the phone in her hand, her heart suddenly pounding. In the secure windowless room of the Joint Special Operations Command Operations Center, Staff Sergeant Lucas Rodriguez stared at his monitor, his blood running cold. The name Blackwood Evelyn had flagged in the system with a level of clearance he'd never seen before. It bypassed 5 levels of security protocols and brought up a single heavily redacted file. Most of it was just black lines, classification markers, stacked on classification markers. But a few words shone through like beacons in the dark. Task Force Sentinel Operation Silent Dawn. The Reaper of Eastern Corridor. At the top of the file was a single stark warning in crimson letters. Incident of contact requires immediate notification to O6 level or higher. Do not engage. Do not detain. Extreme caution advised. Rodriguez's hand shook as he picked up the direct line to his commanding officer's residence. He didn't care that it was almost 10 at night. He didn't care that Colonel Sterling had 3 kids and a wife who'd kill anyone who disturbed family dinner. The system was screaming at him. Every protocol, every safeguard, every warning bell was going off. He was looking at a ghost, a legend whispered in training but never spoken of in detail, a name that shouldn't exist in any current database. And according to the bartender on the phone, a handful of Delta Force operators, his own unit's hothead young warriors, were currently harassing that legend in a dive bar 4 miles from the base. Rodriguez swallowed hard. This was bad. This was very, very bad. Back in the bar, Kai had moved closer to Evelyn. The other patrons were starting to notice now. Conversations faltered. People shifted in their seats, pretending not to watch while watching everything. Look, Kai said, his voice rising slightly. I'm not trying to be a jerk here. But men I knew, better men than you or me, have died for the patches they wore. So when I see someone wearing something she can't or won't identify, it pisses me off. He jabbed his finger toward the patch again. One more time. What unit? Griffin stepped closer, adding his presence to the pressure. We can do this easy or hard, ma'am. You can tell us or we can make some calls. Run that patch through official channels. See what comes back. Sloan, still on his phone, frowned. Guys, I'm running facial recognition on military databases. There's no Evelyn Blackwood in any combat unit records from... Because they scrubbed it, Kai interrupted. Classic stolen valor move. Make up a unit that doesn't exist. Wear a patch no one can verify. Evelyn looked from Kai's face to Griffin's, to the faces of the other 3 operators, forming a loose, intimidating semicircle around her stool. She saw their certainty, their judgment, their absolute conviction that they were right. She saw their youth. They were lions, proud and strong and convinced of their own righteousness. And she was just an old woman in their way. She let out a long, slow breath, the sound of a door closing, of a decision made and regretted in the same moment. It doesn't matter anymore, she said softly. What I was, what I did, it's all classified, it's all over, it doesn't matter. Kai scoffed. That's what they all say. He reached out again, this time actually gripping the jacket, pulling it slightly toward him to examine the patch more closely. This thing is falling apart, he said. Threads are barely holding together. You probably bought it at a flea market. Evelyn's hand moved, not fast, not aggressive, but with absolute certainty. Her fingers closed around Kai's wrist, gently, precisely, applying pressure to a specific nerve cluster that made his entire hand go numb. He jerked back, shocked, stared at her. Don't touch it, Evelyn said quietly. Please. The room had gone silent, every eye on them now. Kai rubbed his wrist, feeling returning and painful tingles. That grip, that placement, that wasn't the random grab of an old woman. That was training, advanced training. Griffin noticed it too. His eyes narrowed. Where did you learn that? He asked. Evelyn didn't answer. Sloan's phone buzzed. He glanced down at it, then went pale. Guys, he said slowly, I just got an alert. JSOC high priority dispatch. Fort Liberty vicinity. Like right now. So, Kai said, still rubbing his wrist. So it's marked urgent response to a civilian contact incident. Sloan said, reading off his screen. No details. Just respond immediately. Griffin pulled out his own phone, checked it. His expression changed. Same message, he said quietly. What the hell is going on? Evelyn stood up slowly, carefully. Her hip protested. Her hands found her cane, the one she kept hooked on the stool, barely noticeable until needed. Gentlemen, she said, I think it's time for me to go home. Kai moved to block her path. Not aggressively, but definitely blocking. Ma'am, I think we need to wait until we figure out what's happening here. Let her go, Addie called from behind the bar. For God's sake, let her go. Griffin's phone buzzed again. He looked down, read the message. His face went from confused to shocked to something approaching horror. Kai, he said slowly, step back. What? Step back now. The tone in Griffin's voice made Kai obey without thinking. Training. When your team leader used that voice, you moved. Griffin showed him the phone screen. Kai read it. His eyes widened. The message was simple. Civilian in question is under Omega clearance. Do not engage. Do not question. Do not detain superior officers en route. You are ordered to stand down immediately. Omega clearance, Sloan whispered. That's higher than presidential. That doesn't exist for civilians. Outside, the distant sound of vehicles. Moving fast. No sirens. But coming. Evelyn had heard them before the operators did. Her hearing might be fading, but her situational awareness wasn't. She knew what multiple vehicles moving in coordinated silence meant. She sighed. You should have let me leave, she said quietly. The front door of the bar swung open. 3 black SUVs had pulled up to the curb, moving with the kind of speed and precision that suggested urgency without chaos. From the vehicles emerged 6 men. Not in uniform, dark, well-fitted civilian clothes. But they moved with an authority that made uniforms redundant. They flowed into the bar like water, scanning the room, once assessing and dismissing every person there until they landed on the scene at the bar. Leading them was a tall man with short graying hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. His eyes, cold and clear, fixed on Kai's hand, still hovering near Evelyn's arm. Colonel Jameson Sterling, commander of Delta Force, the man who signed these operators' orders, the man who could end their careers with a word. His presence sucked the air out of the room. Kai and his team snapped to attention instinctively, rigidly, the color draining from their faces as they realized exactly how badly they'd just screwed up. Sterling ignored them completely. His focus was entirely on the small, elderly woman standing by the bar, leaning slightly on her cane, looking tired and resigned, and infinitely sad. He walked forward. His polished shoes made no sound on the old wooden floor. He stopped 3 feet in front of Evelyn Blackwood. The entire bar held its breath. Then Colonel Jameson Sterling, commander of the most elite fighting force in the United States military, snapped his body into rigid attention. He raised his right hand in a salute so sharp and precise it could have cut glass. Chief Petty Officer Blackwood, he said. His voice was low and clear and filled every corner of the silent room. Reaper 1, it is an honor, ma'am. Evelyn slowly, painfully straightened. She looked at the colonel, at this man of immense power and authority, saluting her in a dive bar. She gave a slow, tired nod of acknowledgement. Sterling held the salute for 3 full seconds. Then he dropped his hand. He turned his head. His icy gaze fell upon Kai and his 4 teammates, who now looked like terrified schoolboys caught vandalizing the principal's office. What? Sterling asked, his voice dropping into a whisper that was somehow more terrifying than any shout could ever be. Do you think you are doing? Kai Thornton had faced enemy fire in 3 war zones, had jumped from aircraft at 30,000 feet, had cleared rooms where death waited behind every door. He'd been trained to handle fear, to process it, to push through it. But nothing in his training had prepared him for the look in Colonel Sterling's eyes at that moment. Sir, Kai managed, his voice barely steady. We thought we believed. You thought. Sterling's voice was soft, precise, each word landing like a blade. You are paid to fight, to follow orders, to be the smartest, most disciplined soldiers on this planet. You are not paid to think in a civilian establishment while harassing a citizen. He took 1 step forward. All 5 operators flinched, and you are certainly not qualified to pass judgment on this woman. Sterling turned slightly, addressing everyone in the bar, the civilians watching, the regulars who'd paused their drinks, the bartender standing frozen behind the counter. Let me tell you who this woman is, he said quietly. Evelyn closed her eyes. She knew what was coming, had known from the moment Sterling walked through that door. The past she'd spent 47 years burying was about to be exhumed in front of strangers and operators and people who came here for cheap beer and peace. I see the woman who held the Eastern Quarter at the Battle of Khost for 19 hours after the rest of her team was wounded or killed. Evelyn's hands tightened on her cane. That wasn't the story. That was never the story. But Sterling was doing what commanders did, shaping narrative, building legend, protecting classified details while revealing enough to make his point. I see the medic who went into operations so classified they were officially denied by 2 administrations. Eastern Europe, Evelyn thought. The Balkans before they called it that. Places that didn't have names on any map she'd ever seen. I see the operator who designed the close quarters combat medical protocols that you, Sterling stabbed a finger at Kai, were taught in your training. Techniques that have saved your life a dozen times over without you ever knowing whose mind created them. Sloane's phone was out again, but this time he wasn't searching databases. He was recording, documenting. This was history unfolding in real time. Sterling's gaze dropped to the patch on Evelyn's jacket, his voice filled with something approaching reverence. And this patch, you dismissed it, called it a joke. Threads barely holding together. He paused, let the silence build. This is the symbol of Task Force Sentinel, a unit that officially never existed. A unit of ghosts who did the impossible in places they were never supposed to be. Task Force Sentinel. The name sent ripples through the operators who knew their history. Whispered in training, never confirmed, never documented. The kind of unit that lived in the spaces between official records. And within that unit, Sterling said, there was an even smaller, more selective team. A hunter-killer element tasked with the most dangerous missions of the Cold War. Medical support and direct action combined. They had a designation. He looked directly at Evelyn. Her eyes were still closed, but tears had started to trace lines down her weathered cheeks. They were called Reapers, Sterling said quietly. There were only 4 of them. He let that sink in, 4 operators, out of millions who'd served. 4. Isn't that right? He said, his voice barely above a whisper now. Reaper 1. The call sign hung in the air. Reaper 1. It meant nothing to the civilians. But to Kai and his team, to every operator in that room who knew the ghost stories told in hushed tones during training, it was like Sterling had just invoked the name of a deity. The legends, the impossibilities, the stories they'd assumed were exaggerated or fabricated or simply wrong. One of them was standing right here, had been drinking tea 3 feet away from them, while they'd mocked her. Kai felt his stomach turn over, felt the hot wash of shame so profound it was almost physical pain. He couldn't meet Sterling's eyes, couldn't meet Evelyn's. He stared at the floor at his own boots, feeling smaller than he'd ever felt in his life. Chief Petty Officer Blackwood served from 1972 to 1990. Sterling said, his voice shifting into the formal cadence of official record. Navy corpsman attached to Marine Force reconnaissance, then to units that don't appear in any standard database. He glanced at Sloane, whose database searches had found nothing, because some records aren't meant to be found. Some stories aren't meant to be told. Some operators are ghosts by design, not by accident. Evelyn opened her eyes. They were red but dry now. She'd cried enough over the years. Tonight was just one more night. Colonel, she said quietly, you don't need to do this. Yes, ma'am, Sterling said. I do. He turned back to his operators. 2 weeks ago, your team deployed to Syria. Hostage rescue. 3 American contractors held in a compound outside Raqqa. You had intelligence. You had support. You had every advantage. The team shifted uncomfortably. That mission was classified. Ongoing investigation. They weren't supposed to talk about it. 2 of your teammates were injured, Sterling continued relentlessly. The hostages died. The mission failed. Griffin's jaw clenched. Kai looked like he might be sick. You filed your after-action report. It went through channels, and somewhere in those channels, it crossed the desk of a consultant we use for high-risk tactical assessments. Sterling pulled out his phone, brought up a document, started reading. Recommendation offset sniper position, 800 meters northeast elevation, advantage critical. Secondary extract route via western approach, not southern. Timeline compression increases risk of civilian casualties. Suggest 48-hour delay for additional reconnaissance. He looked up. That memo was filed under the name E. Blackwood, consultant, classified clearance level Omega. The words landed like physical blows. Kai's phone buzzed. He looked down at it, his hands shaking. Found the original memo in his secure email, the one he'd dismissed 2 weeks ago because some old consultant couldn't possibly understand modern tactical realities. 8 lives could have been saved. The math was simple, brutal, undeniable. The Syria operation, Sterling said quietly, had identical tactical parameters to an operation run in 1978. Operation Silent Dawn, Eastern European theater, same compound structure, same enemy force composition, same hostage scenario. He paused. Chief Blackwood was there. She lived it. She knows what happens when you don't take the high ground. She knows the cost of timeline compression. She knows because she paid it. Evelyn's fingers went to the patch, touched the faded threads, felt the shape of the skull beneath her fingertips. The memories came whether she wanted them or not. Operation Silent Dawn, 47 years ago, a lifetime, yesterday. The compound had been in the mountains. She couldn't say which mountains. The classification hadn't expired, might never expire. But she remembered the cold, the way frost formed on her rifle barrel, the way their breath had misted in the darkness. 4 of them, Reaper 1 through 4, the best the military had produced, the most dangerous, the most expendable. Nathaniel Thornton, Reaper 2, 6'3" of muscle and absolute confidence. Sniper, the best she'd ever seen. He could thread a needle at 1,000 meters in a crosswind. He'd shown her pictures of his daughter before the mission. 3 years old, gap-toothed smile holding a stuffed rabbit. Quinn Ashford, Reaper 4. 5'6", 130 pounds, could run 30 miles without breaking a sweat. Explosive specialist, medic trained like Evelyn. They'd bonded over the shared experience of being women in units that didn't officially allow women, of being ghosts among ghosts. Samuel Blair, Reaper 3, the quiet one. Communications, languages. He spoke 7 fluently, could fake 3 more well enough to pass. He wrote poetry in his downtime. Bad poetry, but earnest. And her. Evelyn Blackwood, Reaper 1, combat corpsman. The one who'd volunteered for this when volunteering meant accepting you probably wouldn't come back. They'd gone in at 0200 hours. The intelligence had said 15 hostiles, low security, quick in, quick out. The intelligence had been wrong. 50 hostiles, heavy weapons, prepared positions. Someone had talked. Someone always talked. The first hour had been chaos. Evelyn remembered treating Nathaniel's leg wound while returning fire. Remembered Quinn shouting coordinates. Remembered Samuel's calm voice on the radio calling for extraction that couldn't come. Not yet. Not while they were pinned. Hour 4, Nathaniel took a round through the chest. Evelyn had been 10 feet away, had crawled to him through gunfire that tore chunks from the stone wall beside her head, had put her hands on his chest, feeling the hot pulse of blood that meant lung damage, possible heart involvement, maybe 30 seconds before shock set in. Stay with me, she'd told him. Breathe, count backwards. Nathaniel had looked up at her with eyes that already knew. Eve, he'd said, using her call sign like it was her name, the one only her team used. My daughter. Tell her, you'll tell her yourself, Evelyn had insisted. Stay with me. But blood loss didn't care about will, didn't care about promises, didn't care that a 3-year-old girl was going to grow up without her father. Nathaniel had died in her arms at 6:27 hours. She'd kept working, kept fighting, because Quinn and Samuel were still alive, and that meant the mission wasn't over. Hour 8. Quinn went down covering an evacuation route. Evelyn had been 20 meters away, had seen the muzzle flash, had seen Quinn stumble, catch herself, keep firing, keep moving, buying time. Go, Quinn had screamed. Get Samuel out, go. Quinn Ashford died holding a choke point, giving the survivors time to reposition. Died doing exactly what she'd been trained to do. Died so others could live. Hour 13. Samuel took shrapnel from a grenade. By then it was just the 2 of them. Evelyn and Samuel, holding a position that couldn't be held, waiting for extraction that might not come, fighting because giving up meant the others had died for nothing. Eve, Samuel had whispered. His abdomen was opened up. Shrapnel had shredded his liver, maybe his intestines. The kind of wound you didn't come back from. Not here, not without a hospital. I'm here, she'd said. I've got you. The poetry, Samuel had said, trying to laugh, coughing blood instead. Was it really that bad? The worst, Evelyn had told him, tears streaming down her face. Absolutely terrible. Good, he'd said, and died. Hours 13 through 17. Evelyn alone. She'd dragged their bodies. All 3. Pulled them to the extraction point because no one left behind meant no one. Treated her own wounds with shaking hands. Returned fire when she had to. Survived because dying meant they'd died alone. When the helicopter finally came, when the rotors beat the air, and hands reached down to pull her up, she'd been covered in their blood. In her blood. In the blood of enemies whose faces she couldn't remember. The medic had tried to separate her from the bodies. She'd pulled her sidearm on him. They come with me, she'd said, or I stay here. They'd come with her. Back in the bar, Evelyn realized she was shaking. The memories had pulled her under completely. She'd forgotten where she was, forgotten the operator staring at her, forgotten everything except the weight of those bodies and the promises she'd made. Sterling's hand touched her shoulder, gently, the touch of someone who understood. Ma'am, he said quietly, you don't have to. They deserve better, Evelyn said. Her voice was rough, raw. I should have seen it, should have pushed for delay, should have. You followed orders, Sterling said. You did your job. You brought them home. I brought home bodies, Evelyn said. Not brothers, not friends, bodies. Kai had tears running down his face. He didn't bother to hide them. Sloan had gone pale. His hands were shaking. "Ma'am," Sloan said, his voice breaking. "Nathaniel Thornton, Reaper 2, he was—" "Your grandfather," Evelyn said quietly. She'd known. Had seen the resemblance the moment Sloan walked in. The same eyes, the same jawline. Genetics didn't lie. Sloan nodded, unable to speak. "He showed me pictures," Evelyn said, "of your mother. She was 3. He loved her more than anything in the world." "She never knew him," Sloan whispered. "He died before she could remember." "He talked about her constantly," Evelyn said. "Every quiet moment, every break. He'd tell stories about teaching her to walk, about her laugh, about plans for when he got home." She reached into her jacket, pulled out a worn leather wallet. From inside, she extracted a photograph creased and faded. A man in uniform holding a little girl, both smiling. "He gave this to me," Evelyn said, "before the mission. Asked me to send it to his wife if he didn't make it. I've carried it ever since. I never could send it. Never could let go." She held it out to Sloan. "It belongs to your family," she said. Sloan took it with shaking hands, stared at the grandfather he'd never known, at the piece of history that had lived in a stranger's wallet for 47 years. "You tried to save him, Sloan said. Not a question, a statement of faith." "I failed," Evelyn said. "You tried," Sloan repeated. "That's what the letter said, that someone tried everything, that he didn't die alone." Evelyn's composure finally cracked. The tears came. 47 years of held grief released. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I couldn't save him." Sloan crossed the distance between them in 2 steps, wrapped his arms around the small, frail woman who'd held his grandfather while he died. "Thank you," he said, "for being there, for trying, for carrying him all these years." Sterling let them have the moment. Then he turned to the rest of the team. "The patch represents 52 people who went home to their families because Chief Blackwood kept them alive. It represents 27 hostile combatants who didn't get that chance because they threatened her people. And it represents 3 teammates she loved, who she couldn't save despite doing everything humanly possible." He paused. "Your Syria mission failed because you didn't listen to her assessment. You thought you knew better. You thought modern tactics had evolved beyond whatever some old consultant could understand." Griffin's voice was hollow. "We were wrong." "Yes," Sterling said. "You were wrong, and 2 men paid for that mistake with their lives. And you get to live with that, just like Chief Blackwood has lived with her losses for 47 years. The bar was silent except for the quiet sound of Sloan and Evelyn holding each other, sharing grief across generations. Sterling continued, his voice quieter now, but no less intense. "After Operation Silent Dawn, Chief Blackwood was offered a medical discharge, full pension, honors, the chance to walk away from the nightmares." He looked at the operators. "She refused, re-enlisted, went back to work, spent the next 12 years training operators in integrated combat medicine, teaching them how to keep teammates alive while engaging threats, teaching them what she learned at the cost of 3 lives. I couldn't stop," Evelyn said softly, pulling back from Sloan. "If I stopped, they died for nothing. If I could teach others, if I could prevent other teams from making the same mistakes, then maybe it meant something." "You trained over 400 special operations personnel," Sterling said, "including me. 1989. I was a baby lieutenant who thought I knew everything. You taught me I knew nothing." He smiled slightly. "You also taught me the protocols that saved my entire team in Fallujah 2004. We were pinned down, medic was hit. I performed a needle decompression using techniques you drilled into me 15 years earlier. My medic lived, went home to his family." "That's what it was for," Evelyn said. "Yes, ma'am," Sterling said. "That's what it was for." He turned to Addie, who was watching from behind the bar, tears streaming down her face. "Mrs. Bishop, I apologize for the disturbance. Chief Blackwood's tab is covered for the next year. Anything she needs, anything at all, you bill to JSOC." Addie nodded, unable to speak. Sterling turned back to his team. "You will report to my office at 0500 tomorrow. You are all suspended from operational status pending review. You will spend the next month in remedial training focused on history, humility, and the understanding that you stand on the shoulders of people who sacrificed more than you can possibly imagine." Griffin snapped to attention. "Yes, sir. You will personally research Task Force Sentinel. Interview every living member you can find. Document their stories. Learn what they did so that you could do what you do." "Yes, sir. And you will write a formal letter of apology to Chief Blackwood. Not because I'm ordering it, because you owe it." Yes, sir. Sterling's voice softened slightly. And you will remember every single day that the techniques keeping you alive were bought with blood by people whose names you'll never know. By ghosts who sacrificed everything so you could have the privilege of wearing that uniform. The operators stood in silence, chastened, humbled, changed. Evelyn touched Sterling's arm. Jameson, she said quietly, walk me to my car. Yes, ma'am. As they moved toward the door, Kai stepped forward. Chief Blackwood, he said, I don't have words for how sorry I am. Evelyn looked at him, really looked at him, saw the tears, the shame, the genuine remorse. You have fire, she said. That's good. Fire keeps you alive. But fire without wisdom burns innocent people. Yes, ma'am. Learn from this, she said. Teach others. Pass it forward. That's how you apologize. Not with words, with action. She turned to Sloan, still holding his grandfather's photograph. Keep that, she said. Show it to your mother. Tell her he loved her. Tell her his last thoughts were of her. I will, Sloan promised. And tell her, Evelyn's voice caught, tell her I'm sorry, that I tried, that he didn't die alone. She knows, Sloan said. Somehow I think she's always known. Sterling guided Evelyn toward the door. The other operators parted like water, creating a path. At the threshold, Evelyn paused, looked back at the bar, at the stool she'd occupied 3 nights a week for 15 years, at the glass of tea still sitting there, ice mostly melted. Addie, she called to the bartender. Yes, Mrs. Blackwood. I'll be back Wednesday, Evelyn said. Same time, same seat. Addie smiled through tears. I'll have your tea ready, honey. As Sterling helped her into one of the SUVs, Evelyn looked up at the night sky. Stars were visible despite the light pollution, cold and distant and eternal. Nathaniel loved the stars, she said quietly. Used to calculate trajectories by constellation positions. Said he trusted the stars more than any computer. He trained an entire generation of snipers, Sterling said. His techniques are still taught at Fort Libbard. I know, Evelyn said. I made sure of that. After he died, made sure his knowledge lived on. Sterling closed the door, walked around to the driver's side, started the engine. Where to, ma'am? Home, Evelyn said. I'm very tired, Jameson. Yes, ma'am. As they pulled away from the bar, Evelyn looked back one last time, saw the operator standing in the doorway silhouetted against the light, saw them watching, learning, beginning to understand. They're good men, she said. They will be, Sterling said. After tonight, they will be. The vehicle disappeared into the night, carrying a ghost back to the quiet life she'd built from the ashes of the one she'd lost. Inside the bar, Kai stood holding the jacket Evelyn had left behind. The patches stared up at him. No longer a mystery, no longer something to question. A legacy, written in sacrifice, earned in blood, carried in silence for 47 years. He folded it carefully, reverently. Tomorrow he would begin to learn what it really meant. Tonight he would remember the look in an old woman's eyes when she'd said, I should have saved him, and understand finally what honor actually cost. The week that followed felt longer than some deployments. Kai Thornton sat in the archives of Fort Liberty's Special Operations Command, surrounded by boxes of declassified documents that still had more black lines than readable text. Griffin Hayes sat across from him, reading through after-action reports from operations that had happened before they were born. Sloan Whitmore had a laptop open, cross-referencing names and dates and missions that officially never existed. They were looking for ghosts, Task Force Sentinel, the Reapers, the operators who'd done the impossible in the shadows of the Cold War. Listen to this, Griffin said, his voice hoarse from hours of reading. Operation Iron Shield, 1979. 4-person team extracted 12 hostages from a compound in location redacted under heavy fire. 0 casualties. Medical officer administered combat care while maintaining defensive perimeter. He looked up. Medical officer designation, Reaper 1. Kai didn't respond. He was staring at a photograph he'd found in one of the files. 4 people in field gear, faces partially obscured, standing in front of a helicopter. The photo quality was poor, deliberately degraded for security. But he could make out the patches on their shoulders, the skull and wings. Still new, still crisp. One of the figures was noticeably smaller than the others, slighter. Even through the degradation, Kai could see it was a woman. Reaper 1, 34 years old in that photo, about to walk into hell and come back alone. There's a pattern, Sloan said, scrolling through his screen. Every operation she was part of, the survival rate was significantly higher than standard. 93% of personnel under her medical care survived to evacuation. That's unprecedented for that era. 52 lives saved, Kai said quietly. Sterling said 52. I thought he was exaggerating. He wasn't, Sloan said. If anything, he was being conservative. This is just what made it into partially declassified records. God knows what's still buried. Griffin closed the report he was reading, rubbed his eyes. He hadn't slept well in a week. None of them had. I found the Syria brief, he said. The one she sent. Read the whole thing. Every word. And, Kai asked, every single recommendation was correct, Griffin said. His voice was flat. Dead. Every one. If we'd followed it, Mitchell and Torres would be alive. The hostages would be alive. We'd be operational instead of sitting in a goddamn archive learning about our own arrogance. The silence stretched. I dismissed it, Kai said finally. Saw the consultant designation. Saw it was from someone outside the command structure. Figured it was just covering their ass bureaucracy. Didn't even read past the first paragraph. We all did, Griffin said. We all made that call. Yeah, Kai said. But I was the one who said it out loud. Who made the joke about old consultants who don't understand modern warfare. He laughed bitterly. Turns out the old consultant understood it better than we ever will. Sloan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then stood abruptly. I need to go, he said. I need to see someone. Who? Griffin asked. My mother, Sloan said. I have something to show her. He left clutching his grandfather's photograph like it was made of glass. Kai watched him go, then turned back to the archives. Kept reading, kept learning, kept understanding exactly how badly they'd failed. 3 days later, Jake Morrison stood on the porch of a small house in a quiet neighborhood 20 minutes from base. The house was modest, well-maintained. A garden in the front yard grew herbs he recognized from medical training. Lavender, chamomile, yarrow, plants used for healing. He rang the doorbell. Evelyn Blackwood answered. She looked smaller here in her own space wearing civilian clothes. A cardigan despite the mild temperature. Reading glasses on a chain around her neck. Mr. Morrison, she said, no surprise in her voice, like she'd been expecting him. Ma'am, Jake said, I apologize for showing up unannounced. I needed to talk to you. Come in, Evelyn said, stepping aside. The interior was as modest as the exterior, clean, organized, photographs on the walls, a husband in navy dress whites, 3 daughters at various ages, grandchildren, a normal life carefully constructed. But on one wall, partially hidden behind a bookshelf, Jake saw a framed commendation. The text was almost entirely redacted. Just a name, Evelyn Blackwood, and a date, 1978, and a single visible phrase, extraordinary valor in combat operations. Tea, Evelyn asked. Yes, ma'am, thank you. They sat in a small kitchen. Evelyn moved slowly, her limp more pronounced, in the privacy of her own home. Jake noticed the pill bottles on the counter. Pain medication, anti-inflammatories, the cost of old wounds carried for decades. You wanted to talk, Evelyn said, pouring tea. I read your manual, Jake said. Integrated Combat Medicine, the 1985 edition, found it in the archives. That was a long time ago. The tourniquet protocol in Chapter 7, Jake said. High and tight applied within 60 seconds of arterial compromise. I used that in Afghanistan, 2019. My team leader took a round through the leg, femoral artery. I had the tourniquet on in 43 seconds. He paused. He lived, went home to his wife and 2 kids, because of what you wrote 34 years ago. Evelyn's hands trembled slightly as she set down the teapot. I'm glad, she said quietly. The whole manual is like that, Jay continued. Every protocol, every technique, they're still being taught, still saving lives. You wrote the foundation for everything I know about combat medicine. Other people contributed, Evelyn said. It wasn't just me. But you started it, Jake insisted. You pioneered integrated combat care. The concept that medics should be able to defend their patients while treating them. That medical personnel should train with weapons because sometimes the only way to save a life is to take one. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. I learned that in 1978, she said, the hard way, when the choice was between picking up a scalpel or picking up a rifle, and I needed both. Can I ask you something, Jake said. You can ask. Why did you hide? Why did you let people think you were just a widow who liked tea? Evelyn looked out the window at her garden. My husband died 15 years ago, she said. Training accident, classified operation. Came home in a flag-draped coffin with a story I couldn't tell and answers I couldn't give. She turned back to Jake. My daughters were devastated. They'd grown up with a father who was always deploying, always gone, always choosing service over family. When he died, they begged me to stop. They'd lost their father to the uniform. They didn't want to lose their mother to the past. So you stopped, Jake said. I stopped operating, Evelyn corrected. I didn't stop serving. I consulted, reviewed operations, sent recommendations, tried to prevent other teams from making the mistakes that killed my people. She smiled sadly. Like your Syria operation, I saw the brief, saw the timeline, saw every mistake we had made in 1978 about to be repeated, sent my assessment, hoped someone would listen. We didn't, Jake said. I'm sorry. I know, Evelyn said. I got the casualty report, cried for 2 days, because I could have pushed harder, could have made my case stronger, could have saved them. That's not on you, Jake said. It's always on us, Evelyn said. Every life lost, every mistake made. We carry them all. They sat in silence drinking tea, two medics separated by 40 years and connected by the same burden. For what it's worth, Jake said finally, we're learning, all of us. Griffin is interviewing every task force Sentinel veteran he can find. Kai is documenting operational patterns. Sloan just drove 8 hours to show his mother a photograph of his grandfather. Good, Evelyn said. And I wanted to ask, Jake continued, would you be willing to teach officially? Colonel Sterling mentioned it, a course on integrated combat medicine, real-world applications, learning from someone who lived it. Evelyn's hands tightened on her teacup. I'm 81 years old, she said. My hands shake. My hip barely works. I'm not. Your hands shake when you're holding tea, Jake interrupted gently. But I watched you at the bar. When you grabbed Kai's wrist, when you applied that nerve strike, your hands didn't shake then. He leaned forward. Muscle memory doesn't forget, ma'am. Your mind is sharper than mine. Your experience is irreplaceable. We need you. I don't know, Evelyn said. Think about it, Jake said. Please. 5 days later, Colonel Sterling's phone rang at 2:47 a.m. He answered on the second ring, instantly awake. Years of deployments had trained him to snap from sleep to full alertness in seconds. Sterling. Colonel, this is Sergeant Hayes Base Hospital. The voice was young, stressed. We have a situation. Training accident. Trainee unresponsive. Possible tension pneumothorax. Our new medic is Sir, he's freezing. He's fresh out of school and he's freezing. Sterling was already out of bed pulling on clothes. I'm 10 minutes out, he said. Keep the trainee stable. Sir, I don't think we have 10 minutes. The medic needs help now. He needs someone to walk him through it or this kid dies. Sterling's mind raced. Then he remembered. Patch me through to him, Sterling said, and call this number. He rattled off Evelyn Blackwood's home phone. Sir, just do it, Sterling ordered. Conference call, now. 90 seconds later, Evelyn's voice came on the line. Sleep rough, but clearing rapidly. Jameson. Chief, I need you, Sterling said, putting his phone on speaker as he drove. Training accident, tension pneumothorax. New medic needs guidance, right now. There was no hesitation. Put him on, Evelyn said. The young medic's voice shook. Ma'am, I can't. Yes, you can, Evelyn said. Her voice was calm, steady, the voice of someone who'd talked people through impossible situations in the dark. What's your name? Corporal Davis, ma'am. Davis, I need you to breathe, Evelyn said. In for 4, hold for 7, out for 8. Do it now. Sterling could hear the medic breathing, centering himself. Good, Evelyn said. Now describe what you see. Trainee male, approximately 22 years old. Blunt force trauma to the chest. Suspected fall from obstacle course. Respiratory distress. Tracheal deviation to the left. Absent breath sounds on the right. Distended neck veins. Textbook presentation, Evelyn said. You know what it is. Tension pneumothorax, Davis said, and you know what to do. Needle decompression. But ma'am, I've only done this on dummies. I've never... Neither had I, Evelyn said. The first time, 1974. Marine with the same presentation. I was 29 years old and terrified. What did you do? I remembered my training, Evelyn said, and I trusted my hands, same hands that had practiced 1,000 times. They knew what to do even when my mind was screaming. Trust your hands, Davis. Sterling could hear the change in the medic's breathing. The fear being pushed down, controlled, managed. Walk me through it, Davis said. Second intercostal space, Evelyn said. Mid-clavicular line. Can you locate it? Yes, ma'am, I'm there. Prep the site, 14-gauge needle. You have it ready? Yes, ma'am. Angle perpendicular to the chest wall, Evelyn said. 90 degrees, steady insertion. You'll feel resistance from the chest wall, then a pop when you enter the pleural space. I'm inserting now. Sterling listened, his hands gripping the steering wheel. 40 years of experience told him this was the critical moment where training met reality, where theory became life or death. Pop, Davis said, his voice awed. I felt it. There's a rush of air. That's the trapped air releasing, Evelyn said. The pressure equalizing. Check your patient's vitals. A pause. Respiratory distress decreasing, Davis said. He's breathing easier. Tracheal deviation correcting. Ma'am, I think he's going to make it. He's going to make it because you did your job, Evelyn said. You saved his life, Davis. You saved his life, Davis said. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could, Evelyn said gently. You just needed someone to remind you that you already knew how, that your training was enough, that your hands were steady. Sterling pulled into the hospital parking lot, saw the ambulance, saw medical personnel moving with purpose, not panic. The crisis had passed. Chief, he said into the phone. Thank you. Any time, Jameson, Evelyn said. That's what we do. The line went quiet, but neither of them hung up. You're going to do it, aren't you? Sterling said. Teach the course. A long pause. Yes, Evelyn said finally. I'll do it. The next morning, Kai Thornton stood at Evelyn's door. He'd rehearsed what he wanted to say 100 times, had written it down, crossed it out, written it again. When she answered, all his prepared words disappeared. I'm sorry, he said simply. Evelyn studied him, saw the dark circles under his eyes, the weight of shame he was carrying, the genuine remorse. Come in, she said. They sat in the same kitchen where Jake had sat days before, drank the same tea. Kai pulled out a folder, set it on the table. I wrote an analysis, he said. Comparison of the Syria operation against your recommendations. Every decision point, every deviation from your brief, every consequence. He opened the folder. Pages of dense text, charts, timelines. 8 lives, he said. His voice was hollow. 8 people dead because we didn't listen. Because I didn't listen. Because I thought a consultant designation meant someone out of touch. Someone who didn't understand. You made a judgment call, Evelyn said. A wrong one, Kai said. A fatal one. Yes, Evelyn said. No comfort, just truth. Kai appreciated that she wasn't trying to make him feel better. I can't fix what I did, he said. Can't bring them back. Can't undo the failure. No, Evelyn agreed. You can't. So what do I do, Kai asked. How do you live with it? Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. You carry them, she said finally. Every day, every mission, every decision. You carry the weight of what happened and you use it. Let it make you careful. Let it make you thorough. Let it make you the kind of operator who listens when consultants send assessments. I will, Kai promised. And you teach, Evelyn said. You pass on what you learn. Make sure the next generation doesn't make the same mistakes. That's what Colonel Sterling wants you to do, Kai said. Teach, officially, a course on integrated combat medicine. Real-world applications from someone who lived it. He mentioned it, Evelyn said. Will you do it, Kai asked. Will you teach us? Evelyn looked out the window, at her garden, at the quiet life she'd built, at the peace she'd found in invisibility. Then she thought about Davis, about the young medic who'd saved a life with her voice in his ear, about all the other young operators who needed knowledge that had been purchased with blood. Yes, she said, I'll teach. 2 weeks later, Evelyn stood before 40 operators in a briefing room at Fort Liberty. She'd been back on base exactly twice in the past 15 years. Both times had felt like stepping into a past life, a ghost returning to haunt familiar halls. The operators stood when she entered, not because someone ordered them to, but because word had spread, because legends traveled fast in the special operations community, because everyone in that room now knew who she was and what she'd done. Colonel Sterling stood at the front of the room. Gentlemen, he said, Chief Petty Officer Evelyn Blackwood, call sign Reaper 1. For the next 4 weeks, she's going to teach you what she learned in 18 years of operations that don't exist in any official record. He turned to Evelyn. Ma'am, they're yours. Evelyn walked to the front, slowly, her limp pronounced, her hands carrying a worn leather satchel that had deployed with her to a dozen countries. She set the satchel down, looked at the faces staring back at her, saw Kai, Griffin, Sloan, Jake, saw the others who'd heard the story, who'd come to learn. I'm not here to tell you war stories, she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. I'm not here to reminisce about the old days or pretend they were better. They weren't. She opened the satchel, pulled out the faded jacket, the patches visible even from the back of the room. I'm here to teach you something simple, she said. Something I learned at the cost of 3 lives I couldn't save. She held up her hands, small, weathered, trembling slightly. These hands can heal, she said. These hands can fight. And the best operators, the ones who bring everyone home, know how to use both. She set the jacket down, picked up a tourniquet from her bag. Integration over specialization, she said. That's the principle. You're not medics or shooters. You're both. You don't choose between saving a life and taking one. You do what the mission requires, what your teammates need. For the next 3 hours, Evelyn taught, demonstrated techniques she'd developed in combat, walked them through scenarios she'd lived, answered questions with the authority of someone who'd been there, done that, and carried the scars to prove it. When the session ended, she was exhausted. But it was a good exhaustion, the kind that came from purpose. As the operators filed out, Sloan approached. "Ma'am," he said, "I showed my mother the photograph. Told her what you said about my grandfather." "How did she take it?" Evelyn asked. "She cried," Sloan said, "but she also smiled. Said she always knew someone had been there. Someone had cared. She just never knew who." He paused. "She wants to meet you, if that's okay." "I'd like that," Evelyn said. Sloan pulled something from his pocket, the patch, the skull and wings, clean preserved, mounted in a clear case. "I can't keep this," he said. "It's yours. It belongs with you." "No," Evelyn said gently. "It belongs with your family, with the Thornton legacy. Your grandfather wore it. Now you know what it means." "I want you to give it to me," Sloan said, "officially, so I remember, so I never forget the cost." Evelyn took the patch, held it for a moment, felt the weight of 47 years pressing down. Then she placed it in Sloan's hands. "Wear it with honor," she said. "Remember what it represents. Not just the victories, the sacrifices, the prices paid by people whose names you'll never know." "I will," Sloan promised. 6 months passed. The seasons changed. Summer turned to fall, fall to winter. Fort Liberty transformed under frost and snow, then thawed into early spring. The integrated combat medicine course became permanent. Evelyn taught 3 sessions training 66 operators in techniques that blended medical care with tactical operations. The course had a waiting list that stretched 6 months out. The Veterans Administration adopted her curriculum for deployment across all special operations units. Her protocols became standard. Her techniques became foundational. Training centers from Coronado to Fort Campbell to Fort Bragg incorporated her methods. In her small house, Evelyn's office wall filled with photographs, graduating classes, thank you notes, letters from operators whose lives had been saved by techniques she'd taught. A commanding officer from Afghanistan wrote that her protocols had resulted in a 73% increase in combat casualty survival rates. Her daughters visited more often, bringing grandchildren, telling her they understood now, that they were proud, that they'd been wrong to ask her to hide. "You served in ways we couldn't understand," her oldest daughter said one Sunday afternoon, watching Evelyn teach her grandson how to identify medicinal plants in the garden. "We're sorry we made you bury that." "You didn't make me do anything," Evelyn said, guiding the boy's small hands to a chamomile flower. "I chose to protect you from the nightmares. That was my choice." "And now," her daughter asked, "now I'm teaching others to survive their nightmares," Evelyn said. "That feels right." Her daughter hugged her. "Dad would be so proud." "Robert knew," Evelyn said softly. "He always knew what I was, what I'd been. He never asked me to be anything else." On a Friday evening in March, Kai's team deployed to Afghanistan, a hostage rescue, similar parameters to Syria, similar risks. But this time they followed the protocols, took the high ground, used the offset positions, compressed the timeline only when safe, double-checked their intelligence, planned for contingencies, 0 casualties, all hostages recovered. Mission success. In the extraction helicopter, Kai looked at his team. At Jake treating a minor wound with techniques Evelyn had refined. At Sloan checking equipment, the preserved patch visible on his tactical vest. At Griffin reviewing the operation with the humility of someone who'd learned that experience lived in unexpected places. He pulled out his phone, sent a message to Evelyn. "Both hands, Chief. We used both hands. Everyone came home." The response came 30 seconds later. "That's what they're for. Proud of you." That same Friday evening, Evelyn sat at her usual spot in Addie's bar. Wednesday had been moved to Friday because the teaching schedule demanded it, but the ritual remained. The tea, the quiet, the remembering. Except she wasn't alone anymore. Kai sat 2 stools down, Griffin beside him, Sloan and Jake at a nearby table. Other operators who'd taken the course scattered through the bar. It had become an informal tradition. Friday nights, Addie's place, the team gathering around the woman who'd taught them what their hands could do. To the ones who didn't make it home, Kai said, raising his glass. And to the ones who did, Evelyn added, and kept fighting. They drank, told stories, shared knowledge, built the kind of community that sustained warriors when the battles ended. The door opened. A young woman walked in, late 20s, fit, confident, military bearing even in civilian clothes. She scanned the room, eyes landing on Evelyn, walked over directly. Chief Petty Officer Blackwood, she asked. Yes, Evelyn said. I'm Lieutenant Harper Ashford, the woman said. Quinn Ashford was my great-aunt. Evelyn's breath caught. Quinn, Reaper 4, dead at 29 holding a choke point so others could live. She wrote in her journal about you, Harper said. Called you the best of us. Said serving with you was the honor of her life. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. She saved my life, Evelyn said. Multiple times. She was extraordinary. I joined because of her, Harper said. Read her journal. Learned about the Reapers. About what you did. I wanted to be like that. Like her. Like you. She was better than me, Evelyn said. Then I have a high standard to meet, Harper said. Evelyn smiled, stood slowly, extended her hand. Lieutenant Ashford, she said formally, it's an honor to meet you. The honor is mine, ma'am, Harper said. I'm here for the next training session. If you'll have me. I'll have you, Evelyn said, and I'll tell you stories about your great-aunt, the ones that didn't make it into official records. I'd like that, Harper said. She pulled out a photograph. Quinn Ashford in field gear, young, smiling, full of life. I carry this, Harper said, the way you carried Nathaniel Thornton's picture. To remember, to honor. Evelyn looked at the photograph, at Quinn's face, at the memory of a friend lost too soon and mourned for too long. She would be proud of you, Evelyn said. I hope so, Harper said. I'm trying to be worthy of the legacy. You already are, Evelyn said, by being here, by learning, by carrying forward what she believed in. On the wall behind the bar, Addie had hung something new, a framed photograph. 4 people in field gear standing in front of a helicopter. The image was still degraded, still partially obscured, but the patches were visible. Reaper 1 through 4, Nathaniel Thornton, Quinn Ashford, Samuel Blair, Evelyn Blackwood. Beneath the frame, a brass plate, Task Force Sentinel, the Reapers, first and last out. Everyone home? Evelyn stared at it. At the faces of friends lost. At the reminder of what had been and what could never be again. Addie, she said quietly, where did you get that? Colonel Sterling, Addie said. Said it was time people knew, time the ghost had names. Evelyn reached out, touched the frame, touched the faces. Hi guys, she whispered. I'm still here, still fighting, still trying to make it mean something. Kai stood beside her, looked at the photograph. They'd be proud, he said, of what you've built, what you're teaching us. They'd be pissed I took so long, Evelyn said, but she was smiling. That night, driving home through streets quiet with the lateness of the hour, Evelyn felt something shift. A weight she'd carried for 47 years, not gone but distributed, shared among the operators she was training, carried forward by people who understood what it meant. She pulled into her driveway, sat in the car for a moment, looked up at the stars brilliant in the clear spring night. Nathaniel, she said to the night sky. Quinn, Samuel, I hope I'm doing this right. I hope you'd approve. The stars didn't answer, but somewhere in her heart she felt a warmth, a certainty, a sense that they did approve, that they always had. She went inside, made tea, sat at her kitchen table, opened her laptop. An email waited from the Special Operations Command. Subject next training cycle. Request for expansion. They wanted more courses, more operators trained, a permanent position as senior instructor, recognition in the official record. Her name, her service, her contributions finally acknowledged. Evelyn's hands hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly, then steadied. She typed her response. Confirmed, ready to serve. She hit send, closed the laptop, sat back in her chair. Outside her window, the garden grew in the darkness. Lavender and chamomile and yarrow, plants used for healing. Inside, an old woman prepared to teach young warriors how to use both hands, how to heal when they could, how to fight when they must, how to bring everyone home. The mission continued. It always had. It always would. On her desk beside the laptop sat 3 items. A photograph of 4 operators standing proud, a worn leather wallet that had carried a promise for 47 years, and a brass coin heavy and solid with words etched deep. Reaper 1, both hands 2025. Colonel Sterling had given it to her after the first training session, said they were making them for every graduate. A reminder, a standard, a legacy. Evelyn picked it up, felt the weight, felt the responsibility, and felt for the first time in 47 years something that might have been peace. The ghosts were still there, would always be there. Nathaniel, Quinn, Samuel. The weight of their absence never truly lifted, but now they had company. 66 operators who knew their names, who understood their sacrifice, who carried forward what they died for. And more coming, every session, every class, every operator who learned that the best hands were the ones that could do both, save and fight, heal and protect. Bring everyone home. Evelyn Blackwood, 81 years old, former Reaper. One current senior instructor of integrated combat medicine looked at the stars one more time. "We did good work today," she said to the ghosts, "and we'll do it again tomorrow." She turned off the lights, went to bed, slept better than she had in years, because the mission continued, and this time she wasn't carrying it alone.